This terrifying story begins in a time when a strange virus had spread everywhere. This virus was infecting people rapidly and completely wiping out their consciousness. Anyone affected by the virus would lose control and turn into a cannibal, brutally killing and eating other humans. The few survivors remained locked in their homes, as if that was their entire world now. The virus had first spread in France, turning almost the entire population into zombies. Inside an abandoned house in that area, a couple named Don and Alice were shown hiding with a few other people. Among them were Jacob and Kim, along with an elderly couple who seemed extremely scared. Everyone in the house lived cautiously, making no noise at all, because if they did, the zombies would break in and kill them all. Somehow, they were managing to survive, hoping that the government would send a rescue team to save them. But the worst part was that they had very limited food and supplies, making survival even more difficult. Alice was seen preparing food for everyone. A little later, her husband Don joined her, both of them looking hopeless because their future seemed uncertain. However, they found some relief in knowing that their children were still safe in another city. They had sent their kids abroad for studies, which had fortunately kept them away from the virus. Meanwhile, zombies had taken over everywhere, meaning there was no safe place left to escape to. Even if they tried to leave, there was no guarantee they'd find safety. One day, while everyone was sitting down to eat, they suddenly heard a noise outside. Listening carefully, they realized it was a small child crying for help, begging to be let inside. Most of the group insisted that they should not open the door. However, Alice pleaded with Don, saying, "Please save him. He's just a little boy. What danger could he possibly bring?" Unable to ignore her, Alice quietly walked to the door and opened it. Standing in front of them was a small boy. But then, they realized something shocking: it was still broad daylight outside. Don immediately brought the little boy inside and shut the door quickly, ensuring that the dangerous zombies outside remained unaware of their hiding place. He tried to ask the boy some questions, but the only thing the child could say was, "My parents turned into zombies and tried to kill me. That's why he had run all the way here." Now, with a new member in their group, their already scarce resources were going to run out even faster. Everyone grew tense, wondering how they would survive. After dinner, a woman named Kim went near a small opening in the door to take a look outside. She noticed a shadow moving and kept staring at it. But within moments, she realized, to her horror, that it was a zombie. The creature had already started breaking through the door using that very opening. Within seconds, it shattered a large portion of the entrance, allowing other zombies to storm inside. Panic spread among the group as they rushed to escape in different directions. The zombies had discovered their location, and now there was no way to hide. One by one, the monstrous creatures entered the house. Don turned to his wife, Alice, and said, "We need to escape through the back." But Alice refused to leave. She was still with the little boy, trying to protect him. Don tried to reason with her. "We have to go. If we stay, we'll die just like the others." But Alice wouldn't listen. She saw her own children in that little boy, and she couldn't bring herself to abandon him. Meanwhile, Jacob and the elderly couple managed to escape through another route. However, Alice and the boy were still trapped. The zombies had surrounded them, their bloodthirsty eyes locked onto their prey as they moved in, ready to tear them apart. Desperate to save his wife, Don ran back inside. But as soon as he stepped into the room, he froze. There were too many zombies. Seeing them all together, his courage crumbled. Fear took over. Instead of fighting, he turned around and ran for his life. Alice screamed for him, but Don couldn't stop. His survival instincts had kicked in. As he fled outside, the sound of his movement attracted even more zombies. Soon, an entire horde was chasing after him. Don was running for his life, begging the universe to spare him. By now, Don's wife, Alice, was most likely dead. Meanwhile, Don was unknowingly leading a swarm of zombies toward Jacob, who was desperately trying to start a boat in the water. Seeing Don, Jacob frantically gestured for him to hurry. The zombies were still right behind Don, so they had to escape as quickly as possible. Don managed to jump onto the boat, but as it jolted, Jacob lost his balance and nearly fell into the water. The zombies lunged at him, ready to tear him apart. But before they could reach him, Don started the boat, and both of them barely escaped. It was such a terrifying moment that they would never forget it. Time passed, and months went by. The city had fallen into complete ruin due to the zombie outbreak. However, at this point, the zombies had started to starve, because the military had already rescued most of the surviving humans. This is when we are introduced to Doyle, a sniper working for the military forces. Positioned on top of tall buildings with his team, his mission was simple: eliminate any zombies on sight. Thanks to their organized strategies, the zombie population was steadily decreasing. But the real problem remained: the virus that was turning people into zombies was still active. Now, we meet Scarlett, a researcher working for the military. She was conducting experiments on human DNA to find someone with a natural immunity. If she could locate a person with high immunity, their body wouldn't succumb to the virus. With this discovery, she hoped to create an antidote. Unfortunately, Scarlett had not yet found a suitable subject. Meanwhile, after all this time, Don reappears. He now works as an administrator for the military forces. People who had been stranded in different countries were being brought back to France. However, before being fully reintegrated into society, they were first placed in District 1, a secure quarantine zone, to ensure that none of them carried the virus. Upon arrival, everyone underwent medical examinations, and only after several days of quarantine were they allowed to reunite with their families. Some time later, Don learned that his children, Andy and Tammy, had also returned. Overjoyed, he went to pick them up. Andy and Tammy were completely safe and healthy, with no trace of the virus in their bodies. However, according to military protocols, every returnee had to go through mandatory testing for safety reasons. So, Don took his children to District 1, where medical examinations were being conducted. Scarlett, the head of the testing team, personally examined Andy and Tammy's blood samples and conducted a thorough medical analysis. During the process, she noticed something unusual about Andy. Scarlett pointed out that Andy had heterochromatic eyes, each eye was a different color. Curious, she asked him, "Does anyone else in your family have eyes like yours?" Andy replied, "My mother did. Her eyes looked just like mine." This revelation stunned Scarlett. Andy had inherited Alice's genes, and in a very strong way. Scarlett became deeply interested in Andy and Tammy, believing they might hold the key to what she had been searching for all these years. She immediately took more blood samples and began extensive research. Somewhere deep inside, Scarlett had a feeling that this family was the breakthrough she had been looking for. Meanwhile, in District 1, Don was finally reunited with his children. But he had no choice but to tell them about Alice. Don lied to them, saying that Alice had died in a zombie attack and that he had tried his best to save her, but failed. What Don didn't tell them, however, was the truth, that he had abandoned Alice to die. Even as Alice screamed for help, begging him to save her, Don had chosen to save himself and fled like a coward. Andy and Tammy could sense something was wrong. Something about their father's story didn't sit right with them. Especially Andy, who loved his mother, Alice, dearly, struggled to cope with the news of her death. He couldn't sleep at night and would often cry for her. One day, while Don was away at work, Andy and Tammy decided to sneak out of District 1. They were heading towards their old home, hoping to collect their mother's photographs and memories. Sniper Doyle and his team were monitoring them closely and immediately informed Scarlett about their movements. Andy and Tammy traveled straight to their house and began gathering their cherished family photos. However, they were utterly shocked when they went upstairs and discovered their mother, Alice, alive but in a terrible condition. Andy immediately ran to embrace her, and surprisingly, Alice was still conscious. Soon after, the military forces arrived and began the process of transferring Alice back to District 1 for further examination. Andy and Tammy were also taken along with her. Scarlett started investigating how Alice had managed to survive despite being attacked by zombies. She discovered that Alice's immune system was exceptionally strong, allowing her body to fight off the zombie virus. Although some parts of Alice's body, including her eyes, showed signs of infection, her immunity had prevented her from fully turning into a zombie. After surviving the last zombie attack, Alice had been hiding in her home all this time. Scarlett found Alice's case extremely unique and decided to take blood samples for research. Scarlett believed that even though Alice was not a full zombie, her bite or saliva could still infect others. Because of this risk, the military made the difficult decision to execute Alice, fearing she could spread the virus further. Scarlett desperately tried to convince the military officers to spare Alice's life. She argued that Alice's unique immune system could help develop an antidote strong enough to eradicate the virus completely. However, the military remained firm in their decision, seeing Alice as too dangerous to be kept alive. When Don learned that his wife, Alice, was still alive, he rushed to District 1's laboratory to see her. A little later, when Don went to Andy and Tammy, they were furious with him. They confronted him, demanding to know why he had lied to them about their mother being dead when she was actually alive, though in a terrible condition. Don started to panic, realizing that he had hidden the truth, that he had abandoned Alice and fled for his own survival. His children still didn't know this. Overwhelmed with guilt, Don quietly sneaked into the room where Alice was being kept. He stood before her, apologizing for his terrible mistake, admitting that he had wronged her. Surprisingly, Alice was still conscious and, despite everything, she told Dawn that she had forgiven him. Overcome with emotion, Dawn leaned in and kissed her. But within seconds, he began feeling unwell. He had no idea that even though Alice had not fully turned into a zombie, the virus was still inside her. Through the kiss, the virus entered Dawn's body, and he started transforming into a zombie. Alice screamed for help, but the chamber was completely sealed, no one could hear her. Within moments, Dawn fully transformed into a ferocious zombie and immediately attacked Alice, brutally injuring her. After fatally wounding her, Dawn broke out of the chamber and began killing every soldier in his path. The situation quickly spiraled out of control. Scarlet, realizing the danger, grabbed Andy and Tammy and ran for their lives. Meanwhile, as soon as the military forces learned about the outbreak, they declared a red alert. To prevent further spread of the virus, all civilians and personnel were locked inside a secure chamber where they would be safe from the zombies. Panic erupted as people frantically ran for safety, trying to escape the chaos that was rapidly consuming District 1. Scarlet's primary responsibility was to keep Andy and Tammy safe, but in the midst of the chaos, Andy got separated from her. The terrified boy searched frantically for Scarlet and Tammy, but everyone around him was only concerned with saving themselves. Panic had taken over as people ran in all directions, desperate to escape. Meanwhile, Scarlet was still running with Tammy, trying to get her to safety. However, Dawn, now a fully transformed zombie, was infecting more people, turning them into zombies as well. Within moments, the number of infected surged, and the virus once again reached its peak outbreak level. More than half of the civilians who had been trying to hide were now zombies. In response, the military deployed all available soldiers and put the snipers on high alert. Among the snipers was Doyle, stationed on a rooftop, taking down zombies with precise shots. However, distinguishing between zombies and normal civilians was becoming increasingly difficult. Despite this, the captain issued a brutal command: no one should be allowed to escape, meaning both infected and uninfected people must be eliminated to contain the outbreak. Doyle, being a true public servant, refused to follow such an inhumane order. He had dedicated his life to protecting people, not killing them. Meanwhile, Andy found an air vent and crawled through it, emerging in an area where zombies and uninfected people were mixed together. Confused and scared, he had no idea where to go next. Suddenly, a zombie lunged at him, trying to attack. Just in time, Doyle, from his rooftop position, took the shot and killed the zombie, saving Andy. However, Doyle could not bring himself to follow his captain's cruel order. He was not going to kill innocent people, especially a helpless child like Andy. Determined to protect him, Doyle left his sniper post and went down to help Andy. As Andy cautiously moved forward, some survivors hiding nearby pulled him into safety. A little while later, Andy was finally reunited with Scarlet and Tammy in that safe hideout. Tammy, relieved to see her brother alive and unharmed, hugged him tightly, vowing to never let him out of her sight again. A short while later, Doyle arrived at the hideout. An elderly woman among the survivors cautiously peered outside and was shocked to see that the soldiers were not just killing zombies but also innocent civilians. Scarlet, realizing the horror of the situation, explained, "This is part of their plan. If the first phase fails and zombies become uncontrollable, the military is ordered to eliminate all civilians as well to prevent the virus from spreading further." The soldiers' primary mission was to contain the infection at any cost, even if it meant massacring innocent people. Hearing this, everyone was terrified. Doyle, understanding the urgency, warned them, "Staying here is too dangerous. We need to leave immediately. The soldiers will be here soon." As they tried to escape, several snipers had already locked onto their positions. One by one, they mercilessly shot down the elderly woman and her family. But Doyle, Scarlet, Andy, and Tammy kept moving forward, searching for a safe place. At this point, we see one of Doyle's fellow soldiers, stationed inside a military helicopter. He was Doyle's friend and was secretly guiding him over the radio, trying to help him escape. Doyle's friend urgently warned him, "You need to get out of the city as soon as possible. The military is about to initiate a massive explosion to wipe out all the zombies." Understanding the gravity of the situation, Doyle, Scarlet, Andy, and Tammy started running as fast as they could. Soon, a massive explosion shook the entire city. Flames engulfed buildings, and the ground trembled violently, eradicating almost every zombie in its path. Doyle and the group continued heading toward the extraction point, the same location his friend had promised to bring the helicopter to. Within a few minutes, Doyle's friend arrived in the helicopter, but there was a catch. He was only authorized to extract Doyle, not the children or Scarlet. His orders from the commander were strict: if he disobeyed, he would be executed. Doyle could not abandon Scarlet and the kids. Without hesitation, he told them, "Get to the stadium. We'll meet you there." His friend, before flying off, gave one last chilling warning: "A horde of zombies is coming your way. They escaped the explosion and are headed straight for the city. You don't have much time." Doyle's friend used the helicopter's machine gun to take down a few zombies, buying them some time. However, Doyle, Scarlett, Andy, and Tammy had no choice but to run deeper into the city. Although the military had stopped their large-scale attacks, they had released a toxic gas that completely destroyed the nervous system of the zombies. Unfortunately, this gas was also harmful to humans. To avoid exposure, the group quickly hid inside a car, but the gas had already started affecting them. Their breathing became heavy, their eyes burned, and their bodies felt weak. Just then, a group of soldiers approached from the front, following strict orders to eliminate anything that moved. The car wouldn't start, so Doyle got out and pushed it while urging Scarlett to try again. After a tense moment, the engine roared to life, and Scarlett sped away with the kids, but Doyle was left behind. As he stood there, coughing from the gas, the soldiers spotted him and opened fire. Doyle was killed instantly. Scarlett, now alone with Andy and Tammy, drove into an abandoned area, but something was already there, waiting for them. It was Dawn, now fully transformed into a zombie. Before Scarlett could react, Dawn attacked her viciously, tearing into her flesh. She screamed in agony but couldn't fight him off. Now, Dawn turned his attention to Andy. He lunged at his son, pinning him down and biting him brutally. Andy cried out in pain, struggling under the force of his undead father. But then, Tammy appeared behind them. She had picked up Scarlett's gun, and with no hesitation, she shot Dawn in the head, killing him for good. Panting heavily, Tammy turned to check on Andy, but something strange was happening. Despite being bitten multiple times, Andy was still conscious. He was not turning into a zombie. His immune system was fighting off the virus. Realizing they had no time to waste, Tammy helped her brother up, and together, they ran toward the stadium, where Doyle's friend was waiting with the helicopter. As they approached, Doyle's friend aimed his gun at them, suspicious of whether they were infected. But the two children stood still, looking completely normal, silent, exhausted, but very much alive. So, Doyle's friend decided to take Andy and Tammy onto the helicopter and flew them away from the city. As they gained altitude, they looked down and saw their entire city in ruins. Buildings burned, streets were filled with corpses, and the virus was far from being contained. At one point, it seemed like the outbreak was nearly over, but now, it was worse than ever. More than 50% of the city's population was dead, and countless others had turned into zombies. The scene then shifted to a dark tunnel, and from its depths, swarms of zombies emerged, moving beyond the city and spreading across Europe. Slowly but surely, the infection was reaching other countries. With no way to contain it, governments across the world issued a global red alert, warning citizens to prepare for the worst. The zombie apocalypse had officially begun, and there was no telling how far it would spread. And with that, our story comes to an end.